Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the Impact Review for the 2nd of February 2021. We roll along. We've got over 1,000 audios in a variety of subjects for you to check out. Of course, the Royal Rumble review from this past weekend and the Raw review from same is, or from last night is here as well, along with literally over 1,000 other options. Anyway, this isn't a bad show. I definitely think that it is the AEW angle saving Impact right now. I would still be watching the program, and I know people have asked me to start reviewing Ring of Honor, and MLW is in front of them, and I just don't have time for that right now with other projects I'm trying to do and running several businesses and 2 YouTube channels and other things. But nothing in the Ring of Honor product catches my attention enough to review them. I may start doing reviews of their I guess, pay-per-views when they do them again. Perhaps, I don't know, but their weekly TV doesn't intrigue me enough to pay full attention. Anyway, so an opening video recaps Joe Doring's Path to Destruction from last week. Cousin Jake joins them in ring. They recap the main event with Trey Miguel making his return to join Rich Swann and Willie Mack and Tommy Dreamer when they fought Callahan, Shamrock, and Bay and Moose. Havoc and Nevaeh start. Havoc with Nevaeh defeat Tasha Steelz with Kiera Hogan. Basically, this is a tag team feud that goes back. Hogan and Steelz defeat Havoc and Nevaeh to capture the vacant knockout championships not that long ago, and Havoc and Nevaeh are looking for a rematch. They jumped the champions last week during their championship celebration. Steelz gets an early advantage. Hogan distracts from the outside, allowing Steelz to get Havoc off her feet, and then they go after a leg. Havoc makes it to her feet again. Havoc takes control. Steelz tries to regain momentum. Havoc has the power advantage and ends it with a tombstone piledriver from Havoc for the win. Hogan tries another distraction, but Nevaeh gets involved, and obviously there's going to be a tag team rematch somewhere down the road. D'Lo Brown and Matt Striker recapped last week's Shamrock attack on the referee and security and Callahan himself. D'Amore blamed Callahan for the attack. Suspend Shamrock indefinitely. Striker and Brown run down tonight's card. Which, by the way, Matt Striker and D'Lo Brown are better than anything WWE offers as far as commentary. They're the only team in wrestling right now that's not on the independent scene that I don't reach for the mute button for. I wouldn't mute Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone, but Excalibur makes me want to mute. So Impact is the only place where I don't reach for my mute button, which is just really weird to me. Anyway, Rich Swann and Tommy Dreamer talk backstage about the title match coming up and the main event tonight, where they face Bay and Moose. Swann basically offers Dreamer that he'd do the work, so Dreamer could be at No Surrender healthy, which I guess is their next little mini pay-per-view gimmick. I really wish Impact would cut back on these because, honestly, it cheapens them and it forces too much content. Anyway, Dreamer took it like it was him being called old and said he could hang, and he said he could hang with the young boys, and he kind of is insulted by all of this. Carl Anderson and Doc Gallows talk about being Impact Tag Team Champions. They're excited to be teaming with Kenny Omega at tomorrow's Dynamite. I'm not a fan of the 6-man tag, but I've mentioned that. I will be covering Dynamite and NXT tomorrow. That's by far my favorite wrestling product, completely by far. Anyway, they talk about getting even with Private Party before No Surrender. James Storm and Chris Sabin approach the Good Good Brothers confront them about post-match attack from a while back. Sabin challenged them to a title match. Good Brothers reject the idea since they didn't have anything else to prove. They want to be fresh for tomorrow's Dynamite, so they push the match off to next week. Josh Alexander defeated Madman Fulton with Ace Austin. I'm not a fan of this. I think Fulton's being misused here. Alexander has his first sight of success since Ethan Page left the promotion, tagging with Matt Cardona last week, defeating the team of Fulton and Austin. Fulton dominates Alexander during the early stages. Alexander goes after the leg, can't bring him down. He eventually manages to use his speed advantage and catches Fulton with a German, counters the big boot for the ankle lock. Fulton regains control and choke slams him. Alexander on the apron, and then he's the second in the ring for near fall, and Fulton goes for finish. Alexander counters with a J Driller and picked up the win. Singles push with Josh Alexander. Feud continues, but it seems like Alexander can start to get a singles push here. Brian Myers comes down to the ring. He's wearing an eye patch after Eddie Edwards goes after his eye last week. Myers says he's somewhat brought the injuries and impact upon himself. He says he's the most professional wrestler. He's going to come face-to-face with the most unprofessional wrestler, Edwards. He wants Edwards at No Surrender, but he's about to say he's not cleared to wrestle, but Edwards runs down to attack him. Hernandez rushes the ring and attacks Edwards. Myers tells Edwards that Hernandez will face him at No Surrender. Cardona comes down and makes the save. Myers and Cardona will eventually have some sort of program, one would bet. Swinger Casino seems to be a thing, and he's cashing out on the house wins over Falaba and Alicia Edwards. It's a disjointed story, to say the very least. Edwards thanks Cardona for the save and proposed they ask for tag match against Myers and Hernandez. Larry D with AC Romano defeats Crazy Steve with Rosemary last week. Larry D blames Rosemary for the issues at Wrestle House and the curse that ends him up in prison, and blaming Talia, who's no longer there. Match is a Styles clash of speed versus power. Steve takes the match over and goes with some momentum. D cuts him off. Romano trips him up and works him over with strikes, tossing him around. Steve keeps trying to bite D as a means to cut him off. Doesn't happen. Match ends with D knocking out Steve with an elbow. Match is fine, but could have been skipped too. Rosemary faced Larry D and actually implied that they should leave her and Steve alone. Giamilla interviews Trey Miguel. He talks about having crutches in the past, referring to Xavier and Wentz from the past, and now he wants to show he can stand on his own. Sami Callihan interrupts him and brings up that Miguel has the tools to be a good wrestler, but not a top guy in Impact. I would agree with this. Xavier and Wentz went from being crutches, and then he's already throwing them under the bus, and Callihan pushed some buttons and told Miguel to think about who he wants to be. Miller interviews Triple XL about D's win over Steve. Miller asks about hesitation against Rosemary, and D said there's no hesitation. Triple XL is ready to take on the whole roster, and he's not going to hit a woman. Tennille and Caleb with a K approached, offered to help them if they need someone to hit Rosemary for them. D said that if Decay can find themselves a third person, Triple XL and Dashwood are ready for them at No Surrender. Yuck. It's flat. Anyway, Jordana Grace with Jazz defeated Susan with Deanna Purrazzo and Kimberly. Grace and Purrazzo goes back quite a few months, and Purrazzo and her friends have antagonized Jazz and Grace, even defeating them not that many weeks ago. Susan jumped and challenged Grace to a singles match last week. Jordana has power and experience advantage over Susan. Purrazzo and Lee keep interfering, allowing Susan to cut Grace off and maintain control. And it would take some time, but eventually things between Grace and Jazz, they take out Purrazzo and Lee. With enough time, Grace could hit a Grace driver on Susan for the win. After the match, Purrazzo and Lee attacked them, and they all gang up on Jazz and Grace. And suddenly ODB makes her return. Little too late in my opinion, but anyway. She makes the save. Grace seems to be building a group of lady veterans. Private Party argues about Matt Hardy. Storm and Sabin are trying to get involved in their business. Hardy tells them to calm down. He already had the Impact Tag Team title shot secured. But now they need to focus on tomorrow's Battle Royal with the Young Bucks, so they can earn a title shot at the Young Bucks. And Hardy said that everything's under control. Then we get a weekly commercial about AEW with Tony Khan and Tony Schiavone, and they hype the beach break. Khan said it's times his time messing with Impact have led him to be more open about making emotional decisions outside of AEW, and that's why he allowed Moxley to go to New Japan. So New Japan and AEW publicly on Impact have been mentioned this week. Grace, Jazz, and ODB talked backstage. ODB said she worked for her food truck nearby and dropped by to say hello, and she decides to help when she saw the attack. Rohit Raju defeats TJP in a non-title match. I don't know. This just feels like a feud that's gone on too long. Rohit requests the match from D'Amore. He expects the title match. He's tricked out of that. Rohit takes on an unknown person to help so he could defeat TJP and get the title match he wanted, which he does not have here. Match is fine. TJP works submissions. Rohit's offense is based on strikes and knee attacks. They go back and forth, and Rohit having a small advantage because his strikes are doing more damage. TJP is relying on reversing and countering. Rohit pins and submissions. They're not necessarily getting the level of damage expected. Raju, later in the match, starts going after the arm of TJP. TJP has changed his game plan up, and he gains momentum, but the long-term plan for Raju had worked. TJP tries to hide under the ring, and Shira is hidden under the ring, and he's ready to take out TJP. Shira slams TJP under the apron. Raju picks up the win. Does he hit squad is back. Not sure that this is a good thing. Going back in time is something I'm never really a fan of. Raju and TJP will be clashing for the title. Most likely at No Surrender. Eric Young and Violence by Design cut a promo explaining why they didn't attack Cousin Jake last week. Jake has an invitation if he chooses to join the group. Miller interviews Cousin Jake about the invitation, and Jake said he didn't have an answer, but he'd give them one next week. Brown and Stryker run down next week's card. ODB versus Kimberly, Kiera Hogan, and Nevaeh. Good Brothers against Storm and Sabin, with the titles on the line, and Swan and Dreamer contract signing. Main event, Moose and Bay defeated Swan and Dreamer. Swan is kind of looking like a weak, a weak champion in the last little while. Like the title win in the Chase was good, but him as champion hasn't really worked, at least from my perspective. This is built from last week's main event. Callahan and Trey Miguel have gone on to have their own program. Swan and Dreamer wrestling for the title No Surrender. Swan makes a comment. He underestimated Dreamer having any more fuel in the tank. And Dreamer's compared to Terry Funk in terms of wrestling. And all of that. Story of the match adds some dissension between Swan and Dreamer. And Dreamer said Dreamer did not want Swan to do all the work, and then finish of the match sees Moose set up lights out on Dreamer. Dreamer moves out of the way and sends Moose into Swan, and Moose pins him for the win. Post match, Moose attacks Dreamer with a second lights out, and whoever wins at No Surrender will have to deal with Moose. Show's fine. Their shows feel flat now without the benefit of the impact of the AEW storylines, and I think that has hurt them. But it is what it is. We are going to be back tonight with more of the Mid-South review series, which I hope to finish this week. I got a little delayed, had other things come up, and was sick and had to deal with some weather issues. So hopefully going to finish those few shows this week. Probably about 15 more of those to do. But anyway, till next time, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment.